Warning, gay hate crime is discussed. Warning, CSA and teen rape are discussed. Noah sighed. After many years of hopping, wondering, and finally realizing that Tate would never feel the same way, he was ready to let his feelings go. There had been times in the past when it had seemed different, when hope had felt justified, but those days were over. Letting go of your feelings in private was one thing. Having the person those feelings were for know exactly how you felt only to reject you was something else entirely. There was a unique kind of pain in being seen so completely and still not being chosen. Noah knew that was the hardest part to leave behind, not simply loving Tate, but living with the certainty that Tate knew and had still turned him away. Jack smiled. That's not the worst outcome. No. Noah nodded. It isn't. I'm putting all of this behind me. He spread his hands. No more wondering. No more what-ifs. No more shenanigans. Bree smiled. Probably healthier. I think so. Susie tilted her head. So there was never really a love triangle. Noah chuckled. No. He shook his head. There never was. Tate loves Chloe. His voice remained steady. And I've just got to learn to live with that. Anna smiled sympathetically. You've always wanted him to be happy. Noah nodded without hesitation. That's never changed. As long as Tate's happy. He smiled. That's all I've ever cared about. Mark watched Noah for a few moments before speaking. You're a terrible liar. The room grew quiet. Noah blinked. What? You said all the right things. Mark smiled sadly. But your eyes don't believe a single one of them. Noah looked away, unable to answer. Andrew exchanged a glance with Bree. Jack sighed. Susie reached over and squeezed Noah's shoulder. You don't have to pretend you're okay for our sake. Anna nodded. It's okay to be relieved for him and heartbroken for yourself at the same time. For the first time that evening, Noah's smile disappeared. He lowered his head. Maybe. No one pushed him any further. Sometimes, the people who know you best also know when silence is the kindest thing they can offer. 3 days later, Chloe sat alone at a quiet corner table in a neighborhood cafe. Her untouched latte had gone cold. She hadn't slept much since the dinner with Tate. Dark circles rested beneath her swollen eyes, and despite trying to compose herself before coming, she knew the moment she saw her friends she was going to fall apart. The bell above the cafe door chimed. Mia spotted her first. Oh my God. She hurried across the room, immediately noticing Chloe's exhausted expression. Chloe, are you okay? Brooke followed close behind, concern spreading across her face. You look awful. Neither woman meant it cruelly, they were simply shocked. Chloe stood and embraced them both. The moment they hugged her, the tears she'd been holding back finally escaped. The 3 women sat down together. No one spoke for nearly a minute. Finally, Mia reached across the table. What happened? Chloe stared at her coffee. Tate left me. Both women froze. What? Brooke whispered. Chloe nodded slowly. He filed for an annulment. Silence. Mia blinked. An annulment. Chloe reached into her purse and carefully removed the thick yellow envelope. She laid it on the table. The paperwork has already been processed by his attorneys. Brooke looked between Chloe and the envelope. He already filed. Chloe nodded. Over a month ago. Mia's eyes widened. A month. He waited to tell me because his father had just died. Brooke leaned back in disbelief. So he knew all this time. He said he couldn't bear handing me the papers while I was grieving. Mia covered her mouth. Oh, Chloe. Chloe forced a broken smile. In a few weeks. Her voice cracked. We won't be married anymore. Brooke reached across the table and took Chloe's hand. I'm so sorry. So am I. Mia looked confused. Did he tell you why? Chloe nodded. He said he never loved me the way a husband should love his wife. Neither friend knew what to say. He said I deserved someone whose whole heart belonged to me. Brooke sighed heavily. That doesn't make this hurt any less. No. Chloe shook her head. It doesn't. Mia frowned. Did he blame you for any of it? Chloe immediately shook her head. No. He went out of his way to tell me none of it was my fault. He said there was nothing I could have done differently. Brooke nodded slowly. At least he gave you that. Chloe looked away. He also offered me $50 million for every year we were married. Both women stared at her. He did what? Mia exclaimed. He said it wasn't to buy my forgiveness. He wanted it to make up for the embarrassment, the gossip, everything I'm going to have to deal with. Brooke let out a slow breath. That sounds exactly like Tate. Mia looked unconvinced. It also sounds like a man drowning in guilt. Chloe nodded quietly. Chloe went on, I think Tate wanted to publicly give me the dignity of being his partner even though our relationship was ending. He didn't want people to look at me as though I'd been discarded. He wanted them to see someone who had mattered to him, someone worthy of respect. Tate loves with his money. That's how he shows he cares. He makes sure the people he loves are protected and financially secure because he believes money creates options, independence, and autonomy. Even when he can't give someone the relationship they want, he'll do everything he can to make sure they're taken care of. Another silence settled over the table. Finally, Brooke asked the question both she and Mia had been avoiding. Do you still love him? Chloe laughed softly through her tears. I don't know how to stop. Mia reached over and hugged her. You won't have to figure that out today. Brooke smiled gently. You've got us. No matter how long this takes. For the first time in days, Chloe felt something she hadn't expected. She wasn't okay. She wasn't even close. But she wasn't facing the end of her marriage alone. Brooke hesitated before asking the question that had been weighing on her mind. Chloe, was there any other reason Tate wanted the annulment? Chloe stared down into her untouched coffee. For several seconds she didn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. No. She slowly shook her head. He said he wanted someone else. Mia frowned. Someone else. Chloe nodded, tears already forming again. But the person isn't even alive. The table fell silent. Brooke blinked. What? He told me he was in love once. Her voice cracked. She died years ago in a car accident. Neither Mia nor Brooke knew what to say. Chloe gave a small bitter laugh. He told me he'd rather live with the memories of someone who's gone than spend the rest of his life with the wrong person. Another tear rolled down her cheek. He said memories were more honest than pretending he could love me the way I deserved. She covered her eyes for a moment. Tate left me. Her shoulders trembled. For a dead woman. The words sounded almost impossible to believe once they were spoken aloud. How am I ever supposed to live that down? Mia immediately reached across the table. Chloe. She gently squeezed her hand. Don't do that to yourself. Brooke nodded. This isn't some competition you lost. Chloe shook her head. But that's what it's going to look like. Her breathing became uneven. People are going to ask why my husband left me. She laughed through her tears. What am I supposed to tell them? Sorry everyone, I couldn't compete with a memory. Mia's eyes filled with sympathy. You don't owe anyone that explanation. Brooke leaned forward. And for what it's worth, I don't think Tate chose another woman over you. Chloe looked at her. He chose his grief. The words hung in the air. Brooke continued quietly. That's different. He isn't running toward someone. He's running toward a part of himself that never healed. Mia nodded. It doesn't make what he did any less painful. But it does mean this wasn't because you weren't enough. Chloe looked out of the cafe window. I know. She swallowed hard. I just wish knowing that made it hurt less. Neither Mia nor Brooke tried to argue. Instead, they moved their chairs closer and sat beside her in silence, letting her cry. Sometimes friendship wasn't about finding the right words. Sometimes it was simply refusing to let someone grieve alone. Brooke sat quietly for a moment, letting Chloe's words settle. She could see the pain in her friend's face, the confusion, the heartbreak, and the feeling that somehow she had lost to something she could never compete with. Then Brooke gave a small, sad smile. My grandmother always used to say something. Chloe looked up. What? Brooke folded her hands around her coffee cup. She said, if something is truly yours, you can let it go and it will find its way back to you. But if it doesn't come back, maybe it was never yours to begin with. Chloe looked down. I hate that. I know. Brooke reached across the table. But sometimes the things that hurt the most are the things we have to accept. Chloe wiped her eyes. So you're saying Tate wasn't mine? Brooke shook her head gently. I'm saying Tate wasn't able to give you what you needed. She paused. And those are two different things. Mia nodded softly. Someone can love you as a person and still not be capable of loving you the way you need to be loved. Brooke continued. If Tate doesn't want you the way a husband should want his wife. She took a breath. Then maybe giving you the chance to find someone who does love you that way is the kindest thing he could ever do. Chloe looked away. Right now it doesn't feel kind. No. Brooke's expression softened. Right now it feels like someone ripped your entire future away. She squeezed Chloe's hand. But someday, maybe you'll look back and realize he gave you something you couldn't give yourself. What? Freedom. Chloe was silent. Freedom to find someone who doesn't make you question whether you're loved. Brooke smiled faintly. Maybe one day you'll meet a man who makes you forget how much this hurt. She tilted her head. Someone who doesn't make you feel like you're competing with a memory. A tear slipped down Chloe's cheek. And if you find someone even better. Brooke smiled. Someone who makes you happier than Tate ever could, someone who chooses you every single day, someone who never makes you feel like you're second place. She shrugged gently. Then maybe Tate did the right thing. Chloe looked at her sadly. Even if he destroyed me first. Brooke's expression became more serious. Even then. She paused. Because staying with someone who isn't completely there can hurt you in ways you don't notice at first. You might spend years trying harder, loving more, giving more. Her voice softened. And quietly grieving the fact that you're not truly happy. Mia nodded. It's better to survive a painful ending than spend your whole life mourning the relationship you wished you had. Brooke looked directly at Chloe. I know it hurts now. It might hurt for a while. But a little heartbreak today is better than losing pieces of yourself every year because you're living a life where you're only loved halfway. Chloe looked down at the annulment papers sitting beside her. For the first time, she didn't see them only as the end of something. She saw them as a painful doorway. A doorway she never wanted. But maybe one day. A doorway that could lead somewhere better. Almost 2 weeks later, Chloe found the envelope waiting for her in the mailbox. It was a yellow bubble flat envelope. For a moment she simply stared at it. She already knew what it was. There were some things you didn't need to open to understand. Some things carried their own weight before you ever touched them. She brought it inside and placed it on the kitchen counter, staring at it for several minutes before finally forcing herself to open it. Inside was a notarized copy of the annulment documents. Her hands trembled as she turned through the pages. The legal language felt cold and distant, nothing like the conversation they had shared over dinner. There was no mention of the tears, the apologies, the years of memories, or the love she had believed they were building. Only facts. The basis of the annulment was that Chloe had entered into the marriage under false pretenses, not because she had intentionally deceived Tate, but because Tate claimed he had not been emotionally capable of entering the marriage honestly. The court documents stated that the marriage was being treated as though it had never legally existed. Chloe was not Tate's ex-wife. There would be no divorce. No division of marital assets. No claim to half of his wealth. Legally, it was as if the marriage had never happened. She sat there silently, absorbing the words. A part of her understood why Tate chose an annulment. Another part of her felt like an entire chapter of her life had been erased. The wedding. The vows. The promises. The moment she believed she had finally found the person she would spend forever with. All of it had existed in her heart. But legally it was gone. Then she reached the financial agreement. Every January 1st, Chloe would receive $50 million. Every year. Until the day she remarried. The money was not considered a division of Tate's assets because, according to the agreement, she had no legal claim to his property, investments, businesses, stocks, or personal wealth. She would not receive half of his fortune. She would not become a beneficiary of his estate. She would simply receive the annual payment Tate had chosen to provide as compensation for the pain and disruption caused by the annulment. Chloe sat back overwhelmed. $50 million a year. It was more money than most people could imagine. But none of it could buy back the future she thought she had. Then she noticed a handwritten letter tucked inside the envelope. Not legal paperwork. Not from an attorney. From Tate. Her heart tightened before she even unfolded it. The message was short. He wrote that there was one thing he wanted her to have regardless of what happened between them. The mansion. He told her the deed had already been transferred into her name. She could keep it. She could sell it. She could rent it. She could do whatever she wanted with it. The house was hers. The property was worth $100 million. Chloe slowly lowered the letter. The mansion where they had built memories. The place where she had imagined growing old with him. Now it belonged only to her. She looked around the room, remembering all the moments that had happened there. The dinners. The laughter. The quiet mornings. The dreams. A home that had once represented their future now stood as a reminder of the life they would never have. At the bottom of Tate's note was one final sentence. Not legal. Not carefully written. Just him. I hope someday you understand that none of this was because you weren't enough. You were everything someone should want. I just wasn't the person who could give it to you. Chloe folded the letter carefully and placed it back inside the envelope. The money, the house, the security, all of it was Tate trying to make sure she was taken care of. But the one thing she wanted from him was the one thing he could never give. His heart. The phone rang just as Chloe was beginning to put the documents back into the yellow envelope. She froze. For a moment, she considered letting it go to voicemail. She knew who it was before she even looked. The name on the screen confirmed it. Tate. Her heart immediately tightened. A part of her wanted to answer because, despite everything, hearing his voice still felt familiar. It still felt like home. Another part of her wanted to protect herself from reopening a wound that had barely begun to close. The phone continued ringing. Finally, with a shaky breath, Chloe pressed the answer button. Hello. There was a brief silence on the other end. Then she heard him. Hi, Chloe. Her eyes immediately filled with tears. Hi, Tate. Neither of them spoke for several seconds. It was strange. Two people who had once shared a home, a bed, and a future now sounded like strangers trying to figure out what they were allowed to say. I got a notification in my email that you received the paperwork today, Tate said quietly. Chloe looked down at the envelope sitting on the counter. Yeah. I thought I'd give you a call. He paused. I wanted to make this as personal as possible. Her throat tightened. Thank you. I know a letter wouldn't have been enough. No. She looked around the house. It wouldn't have. Another silence followed. Tate took a deep breath. I hope I made the right choice. The question surprised her. Tate. I mean it. His voice sounded uncertain in a way she had rarely heard before. I know what the attorneys told me, I know legally what made the most sense, but I still don't know if I chose correctly. Chloe sat down at the kitchen table. You chose what you wanted. No. His answer came quickly. I chose what I thought would hurt you the least and benefit you the most. She closed her eyes. He continued. They told me a divorce would have taken longer. His voice lowered. But with a divorce, you would have technically been able to call yourself my ex-wife. Chloe looked down. An annulment changes that. Yes. He hesitated. At least legally, you wouldn't have a failed marriage attached to your name. His words were careful. You could get married again someday and say it was your first husband. The thought was painful. Chloe swallowed. I don't know if that makes it better. I know. Tate sighed. I know it doesn't erase what happened. A pause. But I thought maybe it would spare you some embarrassment. His voice cracked slightly. I didn't want you to have to explain to people that your first marriage ended in divorce. I didn't want people looking at you like something was wrong with you. Chloe shook her head even though he couldn't see her. There wasn't anything wrong with me. I know. His answer was immediate. I hope you know that. She didn't respond. Because she wanted to. But some part of her was still trying to believe it. Tate continued softly. The annulment doesn't erase our history, Chloe. She looked toward the staircase. Their staircase. The one they had walked up together countless times. Maybe legally it does. His voice became quieter. But emotionally. He paused. It doesn't. A tear rolled down her cheek. You're the only woman I've ever lived with. The sentence hit harder than she expected. You were my home for a while. He swallowed. I know what happened, I know why it ended, but I won't pretend those years didn't exist. Chloe wiped her face. Tate. You can keep my last name if you want. She froze. What? My last name. He spoke gently. If you want to continue using blue, you can. She didn't know what to say. You don't have to. I know. He paused. But I want you to know you can. Another silence. Then his voice became more serious. There is one thing I need to ask. Chloe already knew it was coming. Okay. I don't want you publishing books about this. She stayed quiet. I don't want public speeches, interviews, or press conferences. His tone wasn't angry. It was almost apologetic. It would reflect negatively on my business. I understand. I don't want to control your story. He clarified quickly. You have every right to feel however you feel. He sighed. I just hope we can keep this private. Chloe nodded. I won't hurt you publicly. I know. The trust in his voice hurt more than anger would have. I promise to always speak well of you in public or in private, and if you ever need to talk to me. He paused. You still have my direct line. Chloe closed her eyes. If you need money. If you need advice. If something happens and you don't know who else to call. His voice softened. Ring me day or night. She whispered. Why? A long silence. Then Tate answered. Just because we're not married anymore. He stopped. It doesn't mean we're strangers. And somehow that hurt more than anything else. Because he still cared. Just not in the way she needed. They stayed on the phone for another 30 minutes. They talked about memories. They talked about the house. They talked about small things that felt almost normal. For half an hour, they were not in an old marriage. They were just Tate and Chloe. Two people who had loved each other in different ways. Eventually, they reached the moment neither wanted. I should let you go, Tate said. Chloe closed her eyes. Yeah. Neither of them hung up immediately. Finally, Tate whispered. Goodbye, Chloe. She swallowed. Goodbye, Tate. The call ended. And with it ended the chapter of her life where she was Mrs. Tate Blue. The title was gone. The legal connection was gone. The future she imagined was gone. But the memories remained. And somewhere beyond the pain, beyond the heartbreak, beyond everything she had lost, a new chapter was waiting. Not as someone's wife. Not as Tate Blue's wife. Just Chloe. And for the first time in a long time. Her life was beginning again. Chloe sat at the kitchen table long after the call with Tate had ended. The house was silent. Too silent. For the past 2 years, this had been the sound of their home, the quiet mornings, the distant footsteps, the little noises that came with sharing a life with another person. Now every room seemed to remind her that everything had changed. She folded the annulment papers carefully and placed them back into the yellow envelope. She wasn't ready to put them away completely, but she couldn't keep staring at them either. Eventually she stood. She needed something normal. Something simple. She decided to go back into the kitchen and make herself something to eat. She hadn't realized how long she had been sitting there until she felt how heavy her body was. She walked toward the kitchen, lost in thought when her phone rang. The sound startled her. She glanced at the screen briefly, but she didn't really look. Her mind was somewhere else. She picked up automatically. Hello. There was a pause. Then a man's voice answered. Hello, this is Wayne Vaughn. Chloe stopped walking. I'm sorry. She frowned. I don't know who that is. The man on the other end laughed softly. Not in a mocking way. More like he found the situation unexpectedly amusing. I'm sorry, I should probably explain. Chloe leaned against the kitchen counter. Okay. I'm a childhood friend of Tate's. The name alone made her chest tighten. Tate. Yeah. A brief pause. You might say we're kind of rivals. Chloe was confused. Rivals? Wayne chuckled. That's probably the simplest way to put it. She didn't know what to say. The last thing she expected after ending her marriage was a call from someone connected to Tate's past. Then Wayne continued. I heard you're getting an annulment. Chloe froze. Her hand tightened around the phone. How do you know that? The question came out sharper than she intended. Wayne immediately understood her concern. Relax. His tone became calmer. I have a friend who works at the courthouse. Chloe looked toward the table where the documents sat. That was fast. Courthouse records move faster than people think. A silence followed. Chloe waited, unsure where this conversation was going. Don't worry, Wayne said. I don't plan on telling anyone about Tate's business. She didn't answer. Why would I start now? There was something strange about the way he said it. Like this wasn't the first time he had protected Tate's secrets. Chloe walked slowly back toward the kitchen table. Why are you calling me? Another pause. Then Wayne sighed. Because honestly. His voice changed. You're lucky. Chloe frowned. Lucky. Yeah. The word surprised her. You're lucky you get away from him. She stared at the phone. What? Not everyone can say they were that lucky. Chloe felt a chill run through her. Who are you? I told you. A childhood friend. No. His voice became more serious. Someone who knows Tate better than most people. Chloe sat down. I don't understand. Wayne was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Tate will never tell you why he married you. Her heart sank. What? He won't. Wayne sighed. But I can guess. Chloe gripped the phone tighter. Guess what? I can guess why he chose you. She waited. And honestly. His voice softened. I almost feel sorry for you. The words hurt. Not because they were cruel. Because they sounded like pity. Why? Wayne didn't answer immediately. Because you seem like someone who actually believed him. Chloe's eyes narrowed. Believed what? That he was choosing you. The kitchen suddenly felt colder. Wayne continued. Do yourself a favor. His tone became firm. Never talk to him again. Chloe's expression changed. Excuse me. I mean it. You don't know what happened between us. No. Wayne admitted. I wasn't there for every conversation, but I know Tate. He paused. And I know one thing. What? He didn't marry you because he loved you. The words landed heavily. He didn't marry you because he was ready to build a life with you. Chloe looked away. And he sure didn't marry you because he wanted to get married. Silence. She felt anger rising beneath the sadness. You don't know that. Wayne let out a quiet breath. Tate does what he's told. The sentence confused her. What does that mean? But Wayne didn't answer. Instead, his voice softened. Chloe. For a moment, he sounded almost sympathetic. I truly hope you have a good life. The line went quiet. Wayne. No response. Wayne. The only answer was the sound of the call ending. Chloe slowly lowered the phone. She sat there staring at the blank screen. Her entire life with Tate had already been turned upside down. She had spent days trying to understand how a man could love her, care about her, and still leave her. Now a stranger had called and suggested she didn't even know why Tate had chosen her in the first place. And for the first time since the annulment began, Chloe wondered if the story Tate told her was the whole truth. Chloe sat there for several minutes after the call ended, staring at the phone in her hand. Wayne's words replayed in her mind. Tate does what he's told. What was that supposed to mean? Who was he talking about? What was Tate being told to do? For a brief moment, curiosity pulled at her. A part of her wanted answers. A part of her wanted to call Tate and ask him directly. But then she looked across the kitchen at the yellow envelope sitting on the table. The answer was right there. It didn't matter anymore. At least that was what she told herself. Whatever Wayne meant, whatever secrets existed in Tate's past, whatever reasons he had for making the choices he made, it was no longer her responsibility to understand them. Tate wasn't her family anymore. He wasn't her husband. He wasn't her future. And according to the legal documents sitting in front of her, he wasn't even technically part of her past. Their marriage had never happened. The law had erased the title. It had erased the connection. It had erased the years she spent believing they were building something permanent. Chloe let out a slow breath. She knew better than to think a piece of paper could truly erase memories. But maybe it could give her permission to stop chasing answers she might never receive. She looked around the house. Her house. That was something real. The deed had her name on it. The mansion that once represented a shared future now represented something different. A fresh start. She had security. She had independence. She had more financial freedom than most people ever experienced. She had the ability to rebuild her life on her own terms. And eventually, she knew there would be people who wanted to be part of that life. She was not going to spend forever mourning someone who had already chosen to leave. There would be men who wanted her. Men who would appreciate her. Men who would look at her and see a future instead of a reminder of someone else. Maybe one day she would meet someone who chose her without hesitation. Someone who wasn't comparing her to a memory. Someone who wasn't fighting to escape a past she could never compete with. Chloe picked up the annulment documents one last time and placed them neatly back into the envelope. She still wished Tate well. Despite everything. Despite the pain. Despite the confusion. She didn't hate him. She didn't want revenge. She didn't want to destroy his life. She simply wanted to move forward. Whatever happened around Tate now was his life. His choices. His problems. His future. Not hers. She walked toward the kitchen again, this time with a little more certainty. The woman who had walked into that restaurant believing she was Tate Blue's wife no longer existed. But maybe that wasn't the end of her story. Maybe it was the beginning. And for the first time in weeks, Chloe allowed herself to think about what came next. Not what she had lost. Not what Tate had chosen. Not what she would never have. Just what she could become. Andrew decided he would talk to Tate the next day once his shift at the clinic was over. Andrew's hand was still warm from the steering wheel when he stepped up to the door. He knocked once, deliberately, and waited. Tate opened the door, surprise flickering across his face. "Andrew, what are you doing here?" Andrew gave a small, understanding smile. "Hey, Tate, I wanted to check in after the conversation with Talia at the bistro and your seizure." Tate's brow furrowed. "Right, the restaurant," he said slowly, recognition dawning. "You drove all the way here." "Yeah," Andrew said, stepping inside when Tate opened the door wider. "I thought it might be easier to talk in person." Tate led him to the living room where they both sank into chairs across from each other. Tate's mind was racing, recalling Talia's expression at the restaurant, the tension, the concern, the way she had tried to process everything Noah had told her. "I remember how ill I felt at the restaurant," Tate said, his voice low, a mixture of curiosity and caution. "You were helping Talia understand everything." Andrew nodded. "Yeah, Noah called her to let her know some of the things going on with him and you, Talia. She wanted to process it with someone who could help her think it through without panicking." Tate leaned back, his fingers tapping lightly against the arm of the chair. "I see," he said, "so now you're here for me." Andrew gave a calm, steady nod. "Not to judge, not to interrogate, just to be present, to help if you want it. You don't have to talk about anything you don't want to. I'm just here as a bridge if it helps." Tate exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. "I didn't expect anyone from that side to come to me, let alone Talia's friend." "I know," Andrew said gently. "That's why I came myself. I wanted to make sure you didn't feel ambushed or overwhelmed by information you weren't ready for." Tate led him to the living room where they both sank into chairs across from each other. Tate's mind was racing, recalling Talia's expression at the restaurant, the tension, the concern, the way she had tried to process everything Noah had told her. "I'm glad you care enough to check up on me," Tate said, his voice low, a mixture of curiosity and caution. You were helping Talia convince me to attend therapy. Andrew nodded. Yeah, Noah called her to let her know some of the things going on with him and you, Talia. She wanted to process it with someone who could help her think it through without panicking. Tate leaned back, his fingers tapping lightly against the arm of the chair. I see, he said, so now you're here for me. Andrew gave a calm, steady nod. Not to judge, not to interrogate, just to be present, to help if you want it. You don't have to talk about anything you don't want to. I'm just here as a bridge if it helps. Tate exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. I didn't expect to seize on a cafe floor. I know, Andrew said gently. That's why I came myself. I wanted to make sure you didn't feel ambushed or overwhelmed by information you weren't ready for. Tate studied him for a long moment, weighing whether to speak. It's appreciated, he said finally. I guess I'm still trying to figure out what to do with all of it. Noah and I talked about his feelings. He's not in love with me anymore. I said we're friends. Let's go for a ride, Tate, Andrew suggested, his voice calm but insistent. I want to talk, and I think it'll be easier in the car than just sitting here. Tate hesitated, glancing toward the living room window and then back at Andrew. A ride, where? Somewhere quiet and private, Andrew said with a small smile. Just out of the house, clear your head, get some air, no interruptions, I promise. Tate awkwardly studied him for a moment, then gave a slow nod. All right, okay, I guess that makes sense. They stepped outside, the afternoon sun falling low over the street. Tate followed Andrew to the car, his mind still buzzing from the restaurant conversation and the weight of what Noah had shared. He felt wary, but a tiny flicker of trust had started to form. As Andrew drove, the hum of the engine and the road stretching ahead created a kind of calm rhythm. Andrew kept his eyes on the road but glanced over occasionally, giving Tate space to start the conversation or not. Tate exhaled slowly, the tension in his chest easing just a fraction. I don't even know where to start, he admitted. Start anywhere, Andrew said. Start with what hurts the most or what's confusing or even what scares you. I'll follow your lead. Tate leaned back, staring out the window at the passing streetlights, thinking of Noah, Talia, Chloe, all the pieces tangled together. I just don't know how to process the fact that Noah kept so much from me, that everyone seemed to know except me. I feel betrayed, angry, and jealous, I guess. Of all the people who were allowed to be part of his life, I was left in the dark. Andrew nodded quietly. That makes sense. Anyone in your shoes would feel that way. Betrayal, anger, jealousy, they're all natural reactions. The key is what you do with them next. Tate let that settle, the car rolling past familiar streets. For the first time since the news hit, he felt like someone else could hold a mirror up without making him feel weak. He didn't have to face this alone. Andrew glanced at him, patient. Want to keep talking, or do you just want to ride for a while? Tate thought about it. I want to talk, but I also want to just be here for a bit. I don't have to sort it all right now. Perfect, Andrew said, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. Then we'll do both, one step at a time. And for the first time that day, Tate felt like taking those steps might actually be possible. The road hummed beneath us, steady and unassuming, the late light stretching shadows across the dashboard. I watched the houses slide by and said it like it was a fact I'd already made peace with. I'm glad my mother knows, I said, so she can go back to her life. Andrew didn't answer right away. He slowed at a light, then glanced over at me, not sharp, not accusing, just seeing. I know, Tate, he said quietly. I know, now that everyone knows and all the threads have been pulled, it's done. I scoffed under my breath. You don't have to say it like that. He smiled a little, then looked back at the road. I do, he said, because you're trying very hard to make it sound clean, tidy, like relief. I felt my jaw tighten. It is relief. Some of it, Andrew agreed. Then he added, gently but firmly, you can fool everyone else, kid, but you can't fool me. The word kid landed heavier than anything else Andrew could have said. Andrew kept his eyes on the road, voice steady, almost conversational, but there was no mistaking the edge underneath it. I know when someone's lying to me, Tate, he said. Your mom might not see it, your dumb blonde buddy might buy it, but I don't. I shifted in my seat, bristling. You don't know me like that. Andrew huffed a quiet laugh. You'd like to think that. He tapped the steering wheel once. You can dress it up however you want, clean explanations, noble motives, your family will eat it up, but I know why you put ketchup on cheesecake and lemon sauce on waffles. I frowned despite myself. What the hell does that even mean? It means, he said calmly, you deliberately ruin things before they can disappoint you. You make them wrong on purpose so you can stay in control. The words landed harder than I expected. You can pull that kind of bullshit on Noah, Andrew continued, not unkind but unrelenting. That boy's insanely passionately in love with you, he wants to believe the best of you too much, but you can't bullshit an expert bullshitter. I stared straight ahead, jaw tight. So what, you think everything I say is a lie? No, he said, I think you tell partial truths and call them the whole story. You hide the parts that would make you vulnerable, the parts where you actually want something. The car rolled on, the silence thick. I'm not saying you're manipulative, Andrew added. I'm saying you're scared, and you learned early that if you controlled the narrative, no one could corner you. I swallowed, and what if I don't even know I'm doing it anymore? That, he said quietly, is the most honest thing you've said during this ride. He finally glanced over at me, not accusing, not smug, just certain. You get uncomfortable during long car rides, Tate. You don't need to perform here, he said. You don't need to protect anyone, not your moms, not Noah, not even yourself. I exhaled slowly, and if I stop? Andrew nodded once. Then things get messier, but they also get real, and real is the only place healing actually happens. The road stretched ahead of us, open and unavoidable. For the first time I didn't reach for a clever answer, I just sat there exposed in a way I couldn't spin and strangely didn't want to. Andrew turned back to the windshield. You don't have to say anything right now, he said, just don't lie to yourself while we drive. And I didn't. Andrew glanced over again, softer this time. Did it work, he asked. What, I said. Eating tons of ketchup and lemon every day, he said. Did it help? I hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, I admitted. It did, gave me something predictable, something I could control when everything else felt off. He absorbed that without judgment. Tate, Andrew sighed. Stop lying, why are you that way? It wasn't to control your urges, it was to make you unable to taste anything. You can't taste your food anymore, but that was the goal. So why didn't you tell your mom? He asked. I stared out the window, watching the road blur past. Because she would have panicked, I said. She would have tried to fix it. Doctors, questions, watching me too closely. I thought she knew for years, Andrew, that's why I never told anyone. I thought she knew and cared more about her lifestyle than she did about me, her son. And that scared you, Andrew said. Yeah, I said quietly. I was already afraid all the time. I couldn't handle being afraid and responsible for her fear. He nodded. So you managed it yourself. I always have, I said. If I could keep it contained, if I could make it look harmless, quirky even, then no one would dig, no one would see how bad it really was. Andrew was quiet for a moment, then gently, that's a lot for a kid to carry. I shrugged, the old reflex. Better for me to carry it alone than for everyone to know. I didn't know any other way. I know, he said, but you're not a kid anymore, and you don't have to keep proving how much you can handle alone. I swallowed. Telling her now felt like letting go of the job. I hated my mother my whole life because I thought she knew. Turns out she didn't, and I was manipulated to think she did, so I would never ask her why she never helped me. Once I knew she didn't know, who the hell knows what would have happened if I knew the truth years ago. The car slowed as we turned onto a quieter street. You didn't hide it because you didn't love Noah or your mom, he added. You hid it because you did. I let out a shaky breath. That doesn't make it right. No, he agreed, but it makes it human. We drove the rest of the way in silence, not heavy, not awkward, just honest. And for the first time, I realized that letting people see the strange, messy ways I survived didn't mean losing control. It meant I didn't have to keep fighting myself anymore. After a beat, he asked, quieter now, will you ever tell Noah your secrets? The word never came fast, sharp, never. Andrew glanced at me, concerned. That's not something you say lightly. I'm serious, I said. I would rather load my gun than tell the boy I love or put that weight on him. He kept driving, jaw tight. That bad? Yes, I said, because once I say it out loud to him, it stops being something I did and becomes something he has to live with, and I won't do that to him. Andrew was silent for a long moment. So you're choosing silence, he said finally. I'm choosing containment, I corrected. There are things you lock away because letting them out would destroy more than it heals. Andrew didn't argue, he just nodded once. I don't agree with you, he said, but I understand you. The car moved steadily forward, the conversation settling into something heavy but resolved. Some truths weren't meant to be shared, not because they were shameful, but because they were too sharp to hand to someone you loved. Andrew didn't say anything at first. He pulled the car over, put it in park, and turned off the engine. The sudden quiet felt loud. Then he shifted toward me and, without asking me a question but without forcing it either, pulled me into his lap, solid, grounding, unmistakably protective, not intimate in a way that asked for anything, just shelter. Andrew didn't soften it. He kept driving, eyes forward, voice low and blunt. I know your secret, Tate. I've guessed what's wrong. You've been a terrified 15-year-old boy for far too long. No one in Los Angeles ever had a clue what was really going on with you because you were smart. You were way too smart and clever for your own good. You are the best actor I've ever seen, Tate, and this is why you dumbfounded me for 10 years. Noah is the smoking gun, the reason why you keep acting and lying all these years later. Tate flinched. You believe that telling the truth will ruin the life Noah has built for himself because everything that the blonde enjoys and remembers was something you gave him. Noah needs to know why you never loved him back the way he loves you, he said. And don't bullshit me with I'm straight or I'm married. That's not the whole truth, Andrew sighed. You're not gay or straight, you're traumatized. Tate gulped. You can't let yourself love him, that's the secret to all this mess with Noah. Tate, you can't fall in love with women or Noah because... Don't, Tate said, his face shaking in fear. Don't say it out loud. You can't fall in love with anyone, even Noah, because you already are in love, Tate. You fell first, Noah fell later, but you loved Noah deeper than he could ever hope to love you. That's the secret that nobody ever guessed, not even Noah. Only you and another person know this truth, and it threatens to burn down your life. It's a secret you would take to the grave, a secret you'd kill for or deny it exists. You can't fall in love with Noah because you've been in love with that blonde boy for decades. I think somebody told you that you were in love with him, taunted you with that knowledge, used it against you, and you've repressed that knowledge for 15 years. Tate sat quietly while Andrew kept talking. You will never tell or act on your feelings for him because Noah's involved, isn't he? Noah is at the heart of the secret that must never see the light of day. A secret you'd end your life for if it were ever revealed. If anyone suspected you felt the same way about Noah as he feels for you, they would wonder why you never acted on those feelings, and you couldn't have anyone get that close to the truth. Noah isn't the secret. He's just the motive for the event that became your repressed secret, Tate. Did Wayne know you loved Noah sexually? I flinched but didn't interrupt. No, he never knew, but loved tormenting me anyway. You hate gay people, Andrew continued, not accusing, diagnosing. Or at least you were taught to, and you aren't capable of loving Noah romantically because letting yourself feel anything that blurs straight or gay relationships terrifies and triggers you, especially when it touches the same fear that is the center of your trauma. I'm not 100% sure, but I would bet my life that the person who told you you were in love with Noah was a straight, hateful homophobe. I swallowed hard. That's not. Let me finish, he said calmly. I'm not saying you chose that, I'm saying it shaped you. He glanced over at me briefly. And yeah, I think your food choices are part of it. I scoffed weakly. You think ketchup and lemon made me homophobic? There's only one reason you ate that way, and you can't even say it out loud, can you? Andrew stated a fact. My chest tightened. Noah didn't just love you, Andrew said. He felt something with you, and for you that never was resolved. And you never named why, not because you didn't care, but because numbing it would have meant admitting. This isn't about sexuality, it's about fear. No one, especially Noah, guessed the truth that you fell in love first, and you've been in love with that sweet boy for 20 years, but something kept you from ever accepting it, facing it, and sharing it. I believe that's the reason for this, because something happened to Noah or something occurred involving Noah, and you can't admit your feelings without admitting the part that you can't ever share. I stared out the window, jaw clenched. If I tell him that, he'll think I rejected him. Andrew shook his head. He already does, every day. What you be giving him isn't rejection, it's context. Silence filled the car again. You don't have to tell him everything, Andrew added. You don't have to relive trauma or confess sins, but he deserves to know that your silence about feelings wasn't because he wasn't enough. It was because consciously and openly loving him back the way he loves you would have forced you to relive your worst memories, and it was unbearable. Tate sniffled as Andrew drove. It was your worst memories that made Noah's presence imperative. His persona was calming. You never wanted to know that Noah was gay because believing in his straightness didn't force you to be honest about your sexuality and desires for him. Andrew explained. You could hide behind Noah's perceived straightness, and that kept the house of cards that symbolized your life from collapsing. You didn't have to make any decisions, fight for anything, or demand to be seen for who you really were. As long as you believed Noah was straight, there was a kind of protection in that illusion. It acted like a band-aid over your trauma while still keeping Noah emotionally close. It wasn't something you did out of malice or to manipulate him. You were traumatized and you did what you needed to do to survive. But survival isn't the same as healing. At some point, you have to let go of the illusion so you can finally move forward. My voice came out rough. What if that breaks him? He'll blame himself. Andrew answered immediately. What breaks people isn't always the truth. In this case, between you and Noah, it's unanswered questions Noah has turned inward. I closed my eyes, breathing through the tightness. I'm not saying this to punish you, he said more gently. I'm saying it because you're stronger now than you were when you learned to survive by containment. The car slowed at a stoplight. Noah doesn't need you to love him back, Andrew said. He needs to stop wondering what was wrong with him that he believes made you never love him back. The light turned green, we moved forward. And for the first time, the idea that my silence might have hurt more than my honesty didn't feel like an accusation. It felt like something I might finally be ready to face. Andrew's voice broke just a little then, enough to matter. Please, Tate, he said quietly, don't let this secret take the one person you care more about than yourself. I didn't answer, my throat locked up, the words piling behind it with nowhere to go. He wasn't wrong, and that was the worst part. Noah had always been the constant, the one I rearranged my life around without ever admitting that's what I was doing. You think you're protecting him, Andrew went on, softer now. But from where I'm sitting, you're protecting yourself from the moment he finally stops reaching for you. I shook my head. I couldn't survive being the reason he breaks. Andrew glanced at me, eyes steady, and he couldn't survive thinking he never mattered enough to be told the truth. That landed hard. You don't have to offer him romance, Andrew said. You don't have to become someone you're not. All you have to do is give him the dignity of understanding. Let him grieve accurately instead of guessing. How can he make the best decisions for his life if people he thinks love him keep answers from him and impact his agency? I pressed my palms into my eyes, breathing through the pressure. I don't know how to say it without sounding cruel or making him sick. You say it with ownership, Andrew replied. You say this was about me, my fear, my limits, not your worth. Silence stretched again, heavy but alive. I've watched people lose the ones they love most, Andrew added, not because they didn't care, but because they waited too long to speak. I lowered my hands. And if telling him costs me everything, I just told him a few weeks ago that I don't love him more than as buddies. I also accused him of lying about being secretly gay for many years. I'm a hypocrite. Andrew didn't hesitate. Then at least you won't lose him to a lie. The car slowed as we turned back toward my street. My chest ached, not panicked, not frantic, just full. I'm not telling you to do it tonight, Andrew said. Or tomorrow. I'm asking you not to confuse fear with mercy. I nodded once, that was all I could manage. As he pulled to the curb, he added gently, You don't owe Noah your love, but you owe him the truth about why you couldn't give it back the way he gave it to you. I sat there for a moment after the engine cut, the world quiet around us. For the first time, I understood something I'd been running from for years. Loving someone didn't always mean holding on. Sometimes it meant finally letting them see you clearly, even if it scared you to death. Andrew slowed the car and looked over at me, not probing, not demanding. Take me where the secret felony happened and where this violence ended, Tate, he said quietly. Where did the felony occur and when? You don't have to be alone anymore, you don't have to deal with it by yourself. My hands tightened in my lap. For a second I almost said no out of reflex, years of muscle memory screaming don't go there, then I nodded. Andrew made a U-turn and drove to the south side of Los Angeles towards the Vermont Vista neighborhood. Andrew turned onto Division Street and merged onto South Vermont Avenue, then asked Tate where to pull over. It's there, Tate pointed at an abandoned lot partially hidden from the road. The parking lot was abandoned, the blue walls of the warehouse were chipping, and there was only gravel surrounding the main door of the vacant lot. Andrew parked the car near the front door, which was barely hanging on its hinges due to the elements and no one upkeeping the property. I used to live a few blocks from here, I said, with Noah and our green rambler a few years after I came here, before Wayne came. Andrew didn't speak, he just stayed still, grounding the moment. This was the same place Noah slept on his 18th birthday after Tate's hookup with Emily, and the area where the blonde spent hours the night before Tate married Chloe. This was Noah's favorite isolated location in Los Angeles, where the blonde would come when life became too much to handle. Noah had been in this exact location, lying on this floor 24 hours prior, hallucinating a teenage Tate before Andrew drove here today. This is where we went, I confirm. I let out a breath that shook. I hate this place, Tate shivered. Noah never knew of this place, I made sure of it. Andrew glanced at me. Why? Because I didn't want this to be part of us, I said. I needed dirty, shameful criminal things to stay away from our home, something that wasn't contaminated by fear. We sat in Andrew's BMW for a while, the warehouse looming quietly across the street, no longer a monster, just a building. Tate opened Andrew's car door as he stepped out onto the curb, staring at the warehouse like it was his favorite place to visit. I looked at the building, not wanting to talk about why I hated this place. When the pickup stopped all those years ago, my body knew before my mind caught up. I knew what would happen because it had happened many times before. In this particular incident, my instinct took over. I shoved the car door open and ran as fast as possible to escape the devil. I wasn't fast enough. I didn't get far, maybe 1,000 feet, I explained. And then I was forced to choose, so I came back. After 2 hours, it was over. That's the strange thing about it. I remember the gun, me going inside the warehouse, but I don't remember the ride home. I realized later, me returning home and showering while Noah was concerned. It never lasts as long as it feels like it will. I was aware of the cold concrete under my palms, of air moving in and out of my lungs in uneven pulls. A shadow fell across my field of vision. I had sunk to my knees, terrified of the memories I had of this place. I dissociated and then vomited, violently expelling my lunch all over the cement floor. I began to cry, unable to remain calm in this evil, traumatic location. Tate, Andrew said, calm and firm, already crouching beside me. You're okay, you're here, it passed. I nodded weakly, embarrassed, exhausted. My hands were shaking so badly I curled them into fists just to keep them still. Andrew stood there talking to me. He stayed close enough that I could see his shoes, hear his breathing, steady, unpanicked. Can you hear me? He asked. Yeah, I rasped. There was so much blood, Andrew, it was on the floor, on my face. Jesus, Tate, good, that means you're back, you're safe. I dragged in a deeper breath than another. My heart was still racing, but it wasn't sprinting anymore, more like jogging. I'm sorry, I muttered. Your apologizing isn't necessary. I swallowed, pushing myself up onto my elbows. I hate that the past still has that kind of power over me. Andrew shook his head. It doesn't have power, it is a mere memory, and memory fades when it learns it's safe. I sat there for a moment longer, then nodded. Okay, I said, okay, I can stand. He rose with me, matching my pace, not rushing, not hovering. When we got back to the car, I leaned against it, catching my breath. The warehouse stood behind us, silent and unchanged. I didn't die physically, I said quietly. Tate Blue didn't die, he never existed at all. Andrew gave a small, crooked smile. You ran away from the car that day, but you stopped, you came back, why? I looked at the building once more, then away. I don't own my memories or feel them anymore. It doesn't, Andrew said. Not tonight, and not ever. If you keep doing this with someone like me instead of being alone, you stand a chance at a normal, calm life. I have a guess why you didn't flee. It was love that stopped you from running away that day, wasn't it, Tate? I nodded, drained but clearer than I'd expected. For the first time, the memory didn't feel like a trap. It felt like something that had finally ended. The drive to Chloe's house passed in a kind of muted hush, not awkward, intentional. Andrew didn't turn on the radio, didn't fill the space with questions. He knew I needed the quiet, needed the road and the rhythm of it to stitch me back together. When he finally pulled up and put the truck in park, I reached for the door handle. Before I could open it, Andrew spoke. Tate, he said gently, you dissociated back there at the warehouse. I want you to know that. The gun you mentioned wasn't why you allowed it. My hand paused. I nodded once. No, I felt it happen. I figured, he said. I'm not saying it to scare you, I'm saying it because it matters. I really recommend therapy, real therapy, trauma-focused, and not just a few sessions, extensive counseling. I didn't argue, I didn't deflect. Okay, I said. He studied me for a second, then added, "All those stories you told Noah over the years. You wanted me to hear them from your friends and the blonde. You knew I'd know which parts were true." That hit harder than the warehouse. I swallowed. I didn't plan it, I just knew. Andrew nodded slowly. "Yeah, because we have the same problem." I looked at him then, really looked. The calm, the bluntness, the way he clocked patterns instead of excuses. "Control," I said quietly. "And containment," he replied. "Different details, same instinct." I nodded again. There was a strange relief in being seen that precisely. He didn't argue, he just nodded once. "I don't agree with you," he said, "but I understand you." The car moved steadily forward, the conversation settling into something heavy but resolved. Some truths weren't meant to be shared, not because they weren't shameful, but because they were too sharp to hand to someone you loved. Andrew didn't say anything at first. He pulled the car over, put it in park, and turned off the engine. The sudden quiet felt loud. Then he shifted toward me and, without making it a question but without forcing it either, pulled me into his lap, solid, grounding, unmistakably protective, not intimate in a way that asked for anything, just shelter. "It's okay, Tate," he said quietly, one hand steady at my back. "I'm here for you. I'm not going to use this against you. This isn't leverage." "I know," he said, "and I'm not asking you to. I'm just here so you don't have to hold it by yourself anymore." "Thank you," I whispered, not for the words, for the silence, for the steadiness, for not asking for anything in return. He squeezed me once, firm and grounding. "Any time," he said, "you don't have to earn being cared about." For the first time in a long time, I believed him. Andrew's voice softened, but there was no backing away from it. "Tate," he said quietly, my name weighted with care, "I wish you would tell Noah. That young man deserves to know why something always felt off, why there was a distance he couldn't name." I stiffened, the words landing like pressure on a bruise. "He doesn't need that," I said. "He's built a life, he's happy. I won't be the thing that cracks it." Andrew didn't argue right away. He just waited, letting the silence do some of the work. "I'm not saying you owe him pain," he said finally. "I'm saying he's been carrying confusion for years. He blamed himself for things that were never his fault." My throat tightened. "You think this would help him?" "I think truth gives people their footing back," Andrew said, "even when it hurts, especially then." "I can't let my past hurt him," I choked. "I can't allow Noah to suffer for my sins." Andrew squeezed me once, firm and grounding. "You have me, we can talk anytime, just phone me," he said. "You don't have to earn being cared about." For the first time in a long time, I believed him. Andrew's voice softened, but there was no backing away from it. "Tell me what happened at the warehouse, who was involved, and why the felony occurred, Tate. I'll try to offer professional psych advice, and if you need legal protection, I'll find someone who can represent you if needed." Tate sniffled, wiping tears from his face with the back of his hand. His breathing kept catching halfway through every sentence, like the words themselves hurt to say aloud. "I was 15 when the gay hate crime happened." His voice cracked. "Andrew, one of my male high school teachers, watched me for years, believing I was gay. He warned me to stay away from Noah or else my family's reputation and future would implode from a scandal." Andrew sat frozen across from him, unable to interrupt. "I didn't listen," Tate whispered. "So the teacher threatened to hurt and straighten out Noah if I didn't leave my buddy alone." The car fell deathly silent, except for Tate's uneven breathing. "I met him at the warehouse because I thought maybe we could talk things out. I thought if I acted calm enough, reasonable enough, maybe he'd finally leave us alone." Tate laughed bitterly through tears. "I was stupid." Andrew slowly shook his head. "You weren't stupid." Tate stared down at his trembling hands. "He told me I needed to be straightened out, and he would start with me first, cause I should have known better." His lip trembled violently. Andrew looked at Tate. "What happened?" Tate sniffled. "He tortured me instead for 2 hours." Andrew's face drained of color. "Tate." "I tried to run before it happened," Tate continued, voice barely audible. "God, I tried, but he threatened to drive back where we came from and hurt Noah." His shoulders shook harder. "I stopped running. I went inside the warehouse because I thought if I stayed, if I let him hurt me instead, Noah would be safe." Andrew looked horrified. "You did that alone?" Tate nodded once. Noah never knew it happened, he whispered. No one did. Nobody could suspect that the most attractive straight rich boy in town survived a gay hate crime. The last words dissolved into sobbing. I almost died, Andrew. For several seconds, Andrew could not speak at all. Then quietly, carefully, he moved closer. You were a victim, Andrew said softly. Tate immediately shook his head. No, no, I should have fought harder, I should have told somebody, I should have. Stop. The firmness in Andrew's voice startled him into silence. You do not get to blame yourself for what another man chose to do to you. Tate looked away, jaw clenched tight. You don't understand, he muttered. People like me don't get to be victims. Andrew frowned. What does that mean? Tate laughed weakly through tears. You know exactly what it means. People saw me as untouchable, rich family, football captain, good-looking guy hooking up with girls every few days so nobody asked questions. He swallowed hard. Guys like me are supposed to be the ones in control, not the ones crying in some warehouse begging somebody to stop. Andrew's expression softened with heartbreak. Tate. I spent years pretending it never happened. Tate rubbed at his eyes aggressively. Years, I buried it so deep I almost convinced myself it wasn't real, but it was. Andrew hesitated before asking, did you ever report him? Tate gave a hollow laugh. To whom? My parents cared more about appearances than anything else. The police worshipped him because he was respected in town. His voice turned bitter. And what was I supposed to say? Hi, I secretly loved another boy and my teacher tried to beat the gay out of me. Andrew flinched. I was terrified, Tate admitted quietly, not just of him, of everyone. The confession seemed to drain the last of his strength. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees covering his face. I hated myself afterward, he whispered into his hands, not because I loved Noah, because I survived. Andrew stared at him in disbelief. Tate. I kept thinking maybe if I'd fought harder, maybe if I'd died there, Noah never would have had to lose me slowly afterward. Andrew immediately shook his head. Don't say that. But it's true. Tate's eyes glistened red when he looked up again. After that night, I couldn't let anybody physically or emotionally close to me. I couldn't even look at Noah or sleep next to him for months without his presence triggering me. I pushed Noah away over and over until eventually he stopped trying to understand me. You were traumatized. I was broken. No, Andrew said firmly, you were hurt. Tate looked unconvinced. Andrew continued more gently, there's a difference. The room grew quiet again. Tate wiped his face, exhausted. Sometimes I still hear my basher's voice in my head. Andrew stayed still, listening. Telling me I was disgusting, weak, wrong, Tate swallowed painfully. Some days I still believe that teacher. Andrew's eyes hardened. He lied to you. I know that logically, Tate gave a miserable smile, but trauma doesn't care about logic. Andrew nodded slowly. That's true. Tate leaned back against the couch, staring blankly at the ceiling. You know the worst part. What? I still loved Noah after everything. His voice cracked again. Even after I started avoiding him, even after I became cold and cruel and impossible to reach. He shut his eyes tightly. I loved him every second. Andrew spoke carefully. Did he love you too? Tate let out a shaky breath. Yeah. The answer came instantly. Andrew looked away for a moment, emotional himself now. So why didn't you tell him? Because I couldn't stand the idea of him looking at me differently. Tate's voice lowered to a whisper. I couldn't survive seeing pity in his eyes. You don't know that he would have pitied you. No, Tate admitted, but I knew he would have blamed himself. That silenced Andrew. Tate continued quietly. Noah had this hero complex. If he found out what happened because of him, he shook his head, it would have destroyed him. So you carried it alone. I thought that was love. Andrew studied him sadly, and now? Tate's eyes filled again. Now I think maybe I was just scared to be seen. A long silence stretched between them. Then Andrew finally asked the question carefully. Do you still love him? Tate laughed softly through tears. I never stopped. Andrew hugged Tate while trying to understand why the man had survived. How did that teacher hurt you, Tate? Did he hit you with a bat or? Andrew asked. Tate looked anywhere in the car that wasn't in Andrew's eyes. The homophobic teacher sodomized me with a large cylinder pole on the blue warehouse floor. He dragged me across the floor and held me down. The penetration from the act of violence is why there's a tear inside me. I bled so much from the pole ripping apart my insides and my colon I thought I was dying, Andrew. He tortured me for hours, and when the pole was thrown away he used his fists inside me instead. I begged him not to do it. I told him I couldn't change who I am and I was already getting enough grief at home for not conforming to being straight. I didn't need someone at school giving me the same treatment. I told him I wasn't hurting anyone by being queer, but the teacher didn't care. He said I was important enough in the community that closeted boys at school might get the idea that being gay was acceptable. If they saw me living openly, he believed they would start doing the same, and then he would lose control and his authority. In that moment, it became clear that this wasn't about rules or discipline. It was about fear that simply being myself might encourage others to stop hiding who they were. After he hurt me, the basher still wasn't convinced I had learned my lesson. He decided the only way to make sure I understood was to grape me anally. Every violation was meant to force me into becoming someone I could never be. It wasn't about discipline or teaching me right from wrong. It was about punishing me for refusing to deny who I was. I stiffened, the words landing like pressure on a bruise. "That teacher graped you," he said, tears streaming down his face, "because he thought you were gay." Tate nodded slowly. "I'm not really gay," he said quietly. "I like a lot of things. I think I'm bisexual, but it didn't matter. Nothing I said could calm his rage." He stared into the distance before continuing. "For 2 hours he brutalized me. He was careful. He didn't leave bruises. He didn't leave any marks that anyone else would notice." Tate swallowed hard. "He forced me to perform oral sex on him, and it was awful. The act itself wasn't what traumatized me. What traumatized me was that I had no choice. Whenever I feel attracted to a man, it triggers the trauma of the gay hate crime I survived. That's why anytime Noah tried to get close to me, even if it wasn't sexual, even if we were just standing close together or our lips accidentally brushed, I felt sick. Sometimes I thought I was going to vomit. At the very end, I told him I was going to report him. That's when he wrapped his hands around my throat and strangled me until I lost consciousness. When I woke up, he did it again." Silence filled the room. No one could think of anything to say. The teacher stood at a distance while I struggled back to consciousness. He watched me crawl away, letting me believe I might escape. Then he would step on my hand, crushing my fingers beneath his foot simply because he could. He dragged me back across the floor and graped me again. When he was done with me in the warehouse, the teacher forced me to kiss him until he was satisfied and took me home to Noah. I honestly thought, Andrew, that I wasn't going to make it home. I thought I was just going to disappear and no one would ever know what happened to me. Poor Noah, Tate's voice cracked. He would never have understood. Even now, I still don't want him to know. Andrew looked at Tate. "Can I hug you?" Tate gave a small nod. Andrew wrapped his arms around him and held him quietly for a long moment. "When you're ready," Andrew said softly, "I think you need to tell Noah." Tate shook his head. "I can't tell him, he'll blame himself." "I'm not going to tell him for you," Andrew replied. "That has to be your choice. I'm not going to take your autonomy away because I think I know better than you." He paused before continuing. "But I do think Noah has a right to understand. He deserves to know why you've always seemed emotionally distant, why expressing your feelings is so difficult for you, why vulnerability feels impossible, and why you've carried so much pain by yourself." Tate lowered his eyes, unable to answer. For the first time, he wondered whether keeping the truth from Noah had protected him or only kept them both alone. "Tate," he said quietly, my name weighted with care, "I wish you would tell Noah. That young man deserves to know why something always felt off, why there was a distance he couldn't name." "Noah doesn't need that," I said. "He's built a life, he's happy. I won't be the thing that cracks it." Andrew didn't argue right away. He just waited, letting the silence do some of the work. My throat tightened. "You think this would help him?" Andrew slipped an arm around Tate's shoulders. "Tate," he said gently, "if my childhood buddy sacrificed his own safety and endured sexual violence so that I would never have to experience a hate crime, I'd want to know. I think Noah would want to know, too." He gave Tate's shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "He deserves the chance to understand what you did for him. Let him decide how to carry that truth. Don't make that choice for him. I think truth gives people their footing back," Andrew said, "even when it hurts, especially then." I shook my head. "Or it wrecks him, or he never looks at me the same again." Andrew met my eyes. "He already doesn't," he said gently. "He just doesn't know why." That did it. That cracked something open. I was supposed to protect him, I said hoarsely, not hand him something this heavy. And you did protect him, Andrew replied. For a long time, but protection can turn into silence and silence can turn into a wound that never closes. I looked down at my hands. What if he hates me? Andrew's answer came without hesitation. Then at least he'll be hiding the truth, not a ghost he's been fighting alone. I laughed once, bitter and tired. You make it sound so simple. It's not, Andrew said. It's brave and terrifying and entirely your choice. I'm not pushing you, I just don't want you to confuse silence with kindness forever. I leaned back, staring up at the car ceiling. I don't know if I can be that honest. Andrew looked Tate in the eyes. You're a hero, Tate. Tate started to protest, but Andrew gently shook his head. Noah has the right to know how much you loved him and how much that love cost you. Yes, it may hurt him for a while, learning the truth always does. He paused before continuing. But if you spend your whole life hiding what happened, you're giving that teacher exactly what he wanted. He wanted fear and violence to come between you and the boy you loved. He wanted to steal your voice and isolate you from the people who cared about you. Andrew's voice softened. Don't let him win. Don't let the last thing he took from you be the truth. Tell Noah when you're ready, not for that teacher's sake but for yours and for Noah's. Maybe I will. Andrew nodded. Then don't decide today, just don't swear never when what you really mean is not yet. The words sat there between us, unresolved, heavy but real. And for the first time, the idea of telling Noah didn't feel impossible. Just frightening. And maybe necessary. Andrew didn't soften it. He kept driving, eyes forward, voice low and blunt. I nodded again. There was a strange relief in being seen that precisely. I filed annulment papers to leave my wife, I said, the words coming out flat. I settled the matter recently. Andrew exhaled through his nose, a low, sympathetic sound. Sorry man, that's rough. It's been a day, I said, almost laughing. No kidding, he said, then more seriously, that's a lot of loss stacked at once. Marriage, certainty, the illusion that the past stays buried. I leaned back against the seat. I don't know what comes next. That's okay, Andrew said. You don't need to know tonight, you just need to not pretend you're fine. I nodded. I can do that. He gave a small approving smile. Good. And Tate? Yes. You didn't imagine any of what happened back there. Your body remembered because it had to. Now it gets to learn something new. Going through this alone has never helped anyone, but if you can go through it with someone who can understand what it feels like or perhaps has gone through a similar thing, maybe it's worth reliving it in order to heal and process being a survivor. Thanks for not letting me do this alone, I said. Andrew replied, and I mean that. I was exhausted, raw, unsteady. But for the first time, I wasn't lying to myself about it. And that felt like the beginning of something, not healing yet but permission. Permission to stop surviving in silence. Andrew's voice was quiet when he asked it, like he already knew the answer but needed me to say it. Why did you stop running once you escaped from the car all those years ago? He asked. My chest tightened all over again. I stared at my hands, the words stuck behind my teeth until they forced their way out. Because I was given a choice, it was either Noah or me, I said, my voice breaking. And like always, I chose myself. It was humiliating. The gun didn't make me stay, Noah did. The tears came fast after that, hot, humiliating, impossible to stop. I covered my face, shoulders shaking. I've spent my whole life choosing me, I cried. Protecting him, carrying it so he wouldn't have to. I couldn't do it anymore. I was going to disappear if I kept running. Andrew didn't rush in with reassurance. He let the truth breathe. Your running away wasn't selfish, he said finally. You turned around and offered yourself instead of Noah to a monster. That was love. I was so scared that day. I knew what would happen and why. I had to get the teacher away from Noah, the blonde boy I loved. Noah was so vulnerable, and not knowing how close he was to dying or being hurt, it terrified me. Thank God I saw the danger and lured the man away. I can only imagine what would have happened to Noah if I weren't there, I admitted, the words tearing loose as I cried. Andrew didn't hesitate. He pulled me into a hug, solid, grounding, no hesitation in it at all. He didn't try to stop the tears or talk over them. He just held on. I bet you were terrified, he said quietly, like it was the most obvious truth in the world. The PNES incident at the cafe in front of Talia was you reliving the hate crime and sexual assaults you endured. I'm so sorry, Tate, if I triggered you. My forehead pressed into his shoulder, breath hitching. Yes, I relived the sexual assaults and the pain I endured during my seizure. Anytime I have a seizure, I'm reliving that day and it's unbearable. I didn't know what to do. I thought if I stopped moving or told the truth, I'd disappear. You didn't, he said. You survived it, and you're still surviving it, but now you're not doing it alone. I nodded against him, the shaking easing a little. His hand stayed steady at my back, reminding my body where it was, reminding it that the moment was over. You were a young man, Andrew added. A terrified one. You were hurt in ways no human being should ever suffer alone. There's no shame in that. Andrew's voice was gentle when he asked, "You don't really hate gay people, do you?" I couldn't meet his eyes. I stared at the floor, jaw tight, shame crawling up my throat. "I say I do," I said quietly. "I've said it for years, loudly like armor." Andrew didn't rush me, he waited. "But hate is active," I went on, my voice unsteady. "It's conviction, it's certain, and that's not what it feels like inside." I swallowed. "What I feel is fear, confusion, control slipping, and then I dress that up as disgust because it's easier to hold." Andrew nodded once. "That tracks. You hate gay people because the pervy teacher who assaulted you was a closeted, jealous straight man who used gayness to justify his hate and desire to hurt you. I know why you can't let yourself love Noah openly. Your buddy wasn't there in the warehouse in body that day, but he was there with you during your life-threatening experience in photographs, wasn't he? Your rapist brought a photo of Noah along, so you would be forced to look at it while he brutalized you." Tate flinched. "That's why seeing Noah as anything romantic or sexual is too traumatic to process. It makes you remember the crimes you endured to go home to him alive and well. Anytime you thought of Noah as a romantic option, it resurfaced your SA trauma. You labeled Noah as a platonic buddy after the attack to help you cope with your CPTSD and PNES symptoms." "I loved Noah," I said deeply, safely, and the second it threatened to become something I couldn't categorize, I panicked. I pushed it away. I labeled it wrong so I wouldn't have to sit with what it stirred up in me. "You needed Noah, you just never thought you'd fall in love with him. All those things he did for you that Noah has no clue about are why you love him so much, Tate." "That's not hate," Andrew said. "That's sentiment. You couldn't let Noah go because losing the person you risked your life for was unbearable to you." I let out a shaky breath. "I don't want to be that person, the one who turns fear into silence." "You're not," he said firmly. "People who truly hate don't question themselves like this. They don't grieve the harm they caused. You could never have a future with Noah unless the truth came out, and it probably would have killed you both or traumatized Noah." I rubbed my hands together, grounding myself. "I've hurt people anyway." "Yes," Andrew said, "and you're owning that. That's how change starts, not with denial but with honesty." I finally looked up at him. "I don't know how to untangle it yet." "You don't have to tonight," he said. "All you have to do is stop lying to yourself about what's really there." I nodded slowly. For the first time, the word hate didn't feel accurate anymore. What I felt was fear, and beneath it, something fragile that might one day become understanding if I let it. I wanted to tell Noah how I truly felt, but then he vanished on his 18th birthday and my mom told me he liked girls. I already suspected he was straight, and when he brought home his first girlfriend Maya, I realized that speaking up would destroy the platonic relationship we still had. So I never said a word. While I was waiting for Noah to say something, he was waiting for me to say something, and 10 years slipped away. He dated other people, and I hooked up with countless others because we were both too afraid to tell each other what we truly needed to hear. Now it's too late because telling Noah the truth would only be one piece of a much larger puzzle. Andrew, I can't destroy Noah's happiness to secure my own. I'm not cruel. I won't burn down his entire world, his life, his memories, the places and people that made him happy just to gain him as a partner. I'm not a monster. Andrew watched my reaction closely. "Being honest doesn't make you a monster, Tate," Andrew said. "And staying silent doesn't make you one either. It just means you're afraid, not that you're a coward. Sometimes our secrets and our pain run so deep that speaking them aloud feels unbearable. But eventually you'll have to decide what you want. Do you want Noah as a friend who doesn't know the truth, knowing you're withholding a part of his past that he deserves to understand? Or do you want to be honest, even if it feels like it might destroy you and change whatever relationship you have with him? At least then, whatever the two of you have going forward will be built on the truth, and whatever choices Noah makes will be made with the full picture. He can't live an autonomous life or exercise true agency if he doesn't understand his own past or the role you've both played in it." Tate nodded while Andrew smiled. I have a very good idea why you claim to hate gay people, Tate. It was a closeted person who held a gun at your head before he robbed you of your innocence right after you fled his car outside the warehouse we just visited, he said. I didn't look up, I already knew where he was going. I think meeting Noah was the best decision you ever made. That did it, I let out a long, tired sigh. Did it make the homophobic teacher mad that you had Noah? Andrew asked, amused. Very, I admitted. Andrew laughed, quiet, not cruel. Yeah, I bet it did. People get mad when they don't get what they want. I rubbed a hand over my face. You think this is funny? No, but I would have loved to have seen his face when he realized you were the clever one, Andrew smiled. I looked at him, conflicted. You really think Noah changed me that much? Andrew's smirk faded into something steadier. I think Noah showed you a kind of intimacy that didn't fit the rules you were taught. Your whole school and every authority figure you ever knew never protected you or saw beneath the facade of your and Noah's odd relationship, did they? And instead of rejecting him, you rejected the category he belonged to. It was easier than rejecting the fear. I swallowed. He deserved better. He deserved honesty, Andrew said, and you might still give him that if you're brave enough. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. It pisses me off that you're right. Andrew chuckled. Good, anger means you're close to something true. After a beat he added, his voice gentler now. You don't hate gay people, Tate, you hate what was done to you. You hated the person who hurt you because you were queer, but somewhere along the way your mind convinced you that being gay itself was the problem. You came to believe that being gay made you a monster, that your existence somehow inspired or justified an otherwise ordinary straight man to resort to violence in order to protect what he believed was normal. That's what trauma does, it twists guilt and fear until they become indistinguishable from truth. Noah never knew what you went through or what you were trying so desperately to prevent. He was simply too close to everything your trauma taught you to fear, and being around him awakened feelings you weren't ready to face, emotions buried beneath years of terror, shame, and survival. It was never really Noah you were running from. It was the memories he unintentionally stirred, and the version of yourself you had spent years trying to bury before you were ready to confront it. I closed my eyes, the weight of it settling, not crushing this time, just heavy. And yeah, Andrew finished, smiling faintly, of course it made him mad. People tend to get angry when they don't get what they want or if boys like Noah are in the way. If you need to talk, Tate, call me day or night, especially during major life transitions like separating from Chloe. I'll check in on you every day by phone so I know you're okay. Thanks, I said. For the first time, that didn't feel like an accusation. It felt like grief. And maybe eventually like gratitude. I stepped out of the truck and closed the door behind me. As Andrew drove away, I stood there for a moment, breathing in the night air. Poor Andrew, Tate thought, so trusting, so easy to fool. Tate hadn't wanted to lie, but he hadn't believed he had a choice. He hadn't lied about everything. What he had told Andrew that day in the car and later at the warehouse had contained pieces of the truth. He had simply given Andrew a version he could survive, a monster Andrew could understand. The real truth would have shattered him. Just as it would have shattered Noah. Tate will never tell Noah what really happened in that warehouse, and he could never tell Andrew either. Andrew would believe the version of the story that was easiest to live with. Tate would let him keep it. It was kinder that way. Tate would move on with his life. The thought almost made him laugh. Andrew believed he was so perceptive, so intelligent, so certain he could see through every lie. Yet he still couldn't see it. He was too close to the truth to recognize it. Tate let himself into Chloe's house to pack the last of his belongings. As always, he worked methodically. Every item was carefully sorted. Everything had its proper box and its proper place. The house was quiet. Chloe wasn't home. She was attending a charity event with Noah and Talia. Earlier that morning, Tate had left a voicemail letting her know exactly when he would be there to pack the remaining items. He had also confirmed that professional movers would arrive the following day at 3 o'clock to remove everything that belonged to him. Chloe had approved the schedule and agreed to let the movers into the house. Tate was paying for the entire move himself. He had also hired restoration contractors to repair any damage caused by moving furniture, patch nail holes, repaint the walls where necessary, and leave the house in the same condition it had been before he moved in. He intended to leave without taking anything that wasn't his and without leaving behind anything except empty rooms. Tate had quietly purchased a small mansion on the same block as Noah, but he hadn't told anyone about the move. He also hadn't told anyone that his marriage to Chloe had been annulled. For the moment, everything remained a secret. Chloe had decided they would announce the annulment in a week's time. Together, they had agreed on a simple public explanation. They had discovered they had irreconcilable differences and had mutually decided to end the relationship. They would say they were both happier as friends and happier being single again. It was a story that blamed no one. More importantly, it protected both of them. Chloe wouldn't become the subject of gossip, and Tate's reputation and business interests would remain intact. Their private lives would stay private exactly as they had agreed. Although the marriage had been annulled and the law no longer recognized Chloe as his wife, Tate had made a promise to her. Legally, she wasn't entitled to any of his assets, nor would she ever carry the title of his ex-wife. On paper, it would be as though their marriage had never existed. But Tate refused to let her be erased. If he ever fell in love again and became engaged or remarried, his future fiancée or wife would know about Chloe. He would never hide the fact that she had been the woman he had married, even if the law insisted otherwise. A photograph of Chloe would always have a place in his home. To Tate, it wasn't a reminder of a failed marriage. It was a tribute to a chapter of his life and to a woman he would always respect. If anyone asked why the marriage had ended, Tate would accept the blame without hesitation. He would never allow Chloe to become the target of criticism or gossip, and he would never permit anyone in his presence to speak poorly of her. Whatever had happened between them, his respect for Chloe remained unchanged. After the annulment, Chloe chose to return to her maiden name, Montgomery. She sincerely thanked Tate for offering to let her continue using his surname. It was one of the most respected and prestigious names in California, and she appreciated the generosity behind the offer. But Chloe felt it was time to move forward. The annulment had closed one chapter of her life and opened another. Returning to the name Montgomery felt like reclaiming a part of herself that had existed long before she had ever met Tate. She completed the legal process to restore her maiden name without regret. Tate understood her decision completely. He never took it as a rejection of him. To him, it was simply another step in Chloe beginning the next chapter of her life, and he wished her nothing but happiness as she embraced it. Susie and Talia arrived at the pediatric hospital for the charity event. Nearly 80% of the hospital bore the Blue family's name. Entire wings, research centers, treatment floors, and patient programs had been funded by generations of the family. As they walked through the corridors, Talia slowed to a stop. Something was different. She looked up at one of the bronze dedication plaques. Where she expected to see the names of individual members of the Blue family, there was only one name. Tate Blue. She looked at another plaque. Again it read Tate Blue. And another. Every dedication that had once honored different members of the Blue family had been replaced. The individual names were gone. Every wing, every memorial, and every commemorative plaque had been rededicated to Tate. Talia frowned in confusion. "What happened?" she whispered. It was as though the entire family's legacy had quietly been gathered together and placed under a single name. For decades, each pediatric wing of the hospital had honored a different member of the Blue family. There had been the Joseph Blue Wing, the Terrence Blue Wing, the Tim Blue Wing, and many others. Every plaque represented someone whose philanthropy and service had helped build the hospital into what it was. Now they were gone. Every dedication had been removed. In their place, every wing bore the same name. Tate Blue Wing. The bronze plaques had been replaced, the donor walls had been updated, even the engraved directories listed only one benefactor's name. It was as if every trace of the rest of the Blue family had been deliberately erased from the hospital's history. Talia stared in disbelief. "This can't be right," she whispered. Susie looked equally unsettled. Neither of them was pleased. Honoring Tate's generosity was one thing, erasing generations of the Blue family's legacy to do it was something else entirely. The change didn't feel like recognition. It felt like a deliberate rewriting of history. Susie and Talia took a cab to Blue Corporation's headquarters downtown. As the car pulled up to the front entrance, both women fell silent. For 38 years, a bronze statue of Tate's grandfather had stood in the plaza, honoring the man who had built Blue Corporation into one of California's most respected companies. It was gone. In its place stood an entirely different sculpture. A life-sized bronze statue of a young boy lying on the ground on his stomach, legs in the air, completely absorbed in a stack of comic books resting before him. The sculptor had captured the carefree expression of adolescence with astonishing detail. Talia stared at it, trying to understand why it looked so familiar. Then it hit her. Oh my God. It was an exact bronze recreation of the painting Tate had commissioned years earlier. The boy wasn't anonymous. It was Noah at 13 years old, sitting exactly as he had in the painting, lost in his comic books, unaware that anyone was watching him. Someone had removed the founder of the company from the front of the Blue headquarters and replaced him with a monument to the boy Tate loved. Talia walked through the front doors of Blue Corporation and stopped in her tracks. The walls had been completely transformed. Every portrait and commemorative plaque honoring members of Tate's family, both living and deceased, had been removed. In their place hung large photographs chronicling Tate's life with Noah. There were pictures of them at Brown University, starting their first business together, laughing with friends on campus, celebrating milestones, and sharing quiet moments that had clearly meant everything to Tate. The lobby itself was enormous, nearly the size of a train station, yet the displays filled the space with warmth instead of grandeur. At the center of the lobby stood a gallery of Noah's paintings from their years at Brown. Each canvas was displayed on its own easel beneath carefully positioned lights as though it belonged in a world-class museum. Every painting was enclosed in an exquisite handcrafted mahogany frame. Beneath each one was a simple engraved plaque. Noah Lunis. Title of the painting. The year the canvas was painted. There was no mention of their monetary value or artistic acclaim. Only Noah's name and the date each work had been created. Talia slowly turned in a circle, overwhelmed. The corporation no longer looked like a monument to the Blue family. It looked like a monument to Tate's life with Noah. Tate's personal assistant escorted Susie and Talia through the Blue headquarters executive offices to Tate's private suite. The moment they stepped inside, both women realized they were standing in a completely different building from the one Terrence had once occupied. The office no longer reflected the old corporation. Walls had been removed to create bright, open workspaces. Glass replaced heavy partitions, natural light filled the rooms, and the once intimidating executive floor had been transformed into an inviting, modern environment. Tate looked up from his ginormous desk and smiled. Good morning, mothers. He stood to greet them. I forgot you haven't been down here since I took over, what do you think? Talia slowly surveyed the room. There wasn't a single photograph of Tate's family. I noticed the changes, she said carefully. Tate caught the tone in her voice and smiled knowingly. I'm sure you don't approve, he said. No one in this family ever seems to. He leaned against the edge of his desk. The reason I took down my family's pictures is simple. I got tired of them staring at me with judgment in their gazes. He glanced toward the empty walls where the portraits had once hung. That photograph of my father? Every time I sat at this desk, I could feel him glaring at me. It didn't matter how hard I worked. It didn't matter how much money I made, even more than they ever imagined. In my mind, they were always looking at me as though I still wasn't enough. His smile faded. I don't need ghosts judging me while I do my job. Silence settled over the office as Talia looked again at the bare walls, beginning to understand that removing the portraits hadn't been an act of disrespect. For Tate, it had been an act of survival. I was at the hospital, Talia said. You removed every dedication plaque honoring your family and replaced them with ones bearing your own name. I knew you could be narcissistic, Tate, but really. Tate laughed. My name and face are far more attractive than every member of my family put together. Susie rolled her eyes. Oh, of course. Tate grinned before shrugging. Besides, I thought it was more appropriate. He spread his hands dramatically. If my name is everywhere, no one forgets who's in charge. Neither woman looked amused. Then his expression softened ever so slightly. And honestly, these people in our hospital wing are sick. They're fighting for their lives. Do they really want to spend their days looking at memorial plaques with the names of old crusty men glaring at them? It's a little creepy. He glanced toward the window. I've always thought it's rather vain to put your own name on a building or a plaque anyway. If someone has to carve your name into a wall to make people remember them, they've probably missed the point of being an amazing leader. Talia studied him for a moment. She had known Tate long enough to recognize when he was hiding behind humor. She wasn't convinced that was the real reason at all. I brought you something for your office to brighten